What does it take to create a hero? Is a hero made of wire and clay and bronze? Are heroes remarkable people who do remarkable things? Or are they just people like us? Does history create the hero? Or does the hero transform history? This is a story about 4 heroes who were my classmates at the University of Kentucky over 50 years ago. Craig Page and Nate Northington, Wilbur Hackett and Houston Hogg. The 4 men, black and blue, who broke the color line in the Southeastern Conference.
There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul.
On April 9th, 1880, this place on the UK campus was a pasture where the president of the university kept his cows. But it was here that they played the first college football game in the American South. Kentucky University, later called Transylvania, beat Center College 13 3/4 to 0. I guess football was a little different then. In the 1920s, the cow pasture was transformed into Stoll Field. Here on September 30th, 1933, they played the first game in a new college sports league called the Southeastern Conference. This group of Kentucky Wildcats beat Sewanee 7-0. By the 1960s, Stoll Field had a fine new press box and was ready for a third game of even greater historical significance. September 30th, 1967. The University of Kentucky, in the blue jerseys, plays the University of Mississippi, the Rebels of Ole Miss. Every scholarship athlete in every sport at every school in the Southeastern Conference is white. Until now. Trotting onto the field is number 23, a sophomore defensive back from Louisville by the name of Nate Northington. As the first African-American scholarship athlete to play sports in the SEC, Northington becomes a civil rights pioneer. So today, you might assume that Nate would look back on that as the greatest day of his life. But in fact, it was the worst. The morning of the Ole Miss game, Nate learned that his Wildcat teammate, roommate, and friend, Greg Page, had died. Nate's great achievement had been transformed by tragedy. This film tells a story set in the past of how these 4 men had their hearts broken. But it also tells a story set in the present of how their hearts were healed. The 1960s. Jim Crow segregation still dominates life across the South, but an army seeking freedom is on the march through Selma and Montgomery, Memphis and Washington.
Keep on talking, marching up to freedom land.
But civil rights activists are not the only ones who challenged the racism of the 60s. There was another force for change that was remarkably powerful and enduring: the talent and determination of the black athlete. In 1967, when Muhammad Ali refused to fight in Vietnam, other prominent black athletes rallied in support. Leading them was the National Football League running back, Jim Brown.
Of course, probably the best player that ever played a running back. Jim Brown was a star at that time for Cleveland, and I guess my love for football came from watching the games with my dad. I mean, he would get pretty excited about whenever Cleveland played and Jim Brown ran the ball, and he would just jump up and down and scream, you know, "Go Jim Brown, go Jim Brown." And, you know, of course, as you know, Jim Brown, he would go. I pretty much knew that I had a special, you know, talent athletically. All my brothers and sisters were pretty speedy, you know. My dad said that he was fast when he was younger, and my mother said that she was very fast when she was young, too. So it came, you know, through the genes. I think my high school coach mentioned it to me that a recruiter from UK had contacted him, expressed interest, and talked to me about going there. And my friends, of course, knew that Kentucky was recruiting me at that time, that the civil rights marches, you know, the police brutality, and they just felt like that, you know, I probably shouldn't put myself in that position.
In 1962, there were riots at the University of Mississippi when Governor Ross Barnett tried to block James Meredith from enrolling. In fact, Barnett gave a famous speech of defiance that year to thousands of football fans at halftime of their game against Kentucky.
I love Mississippi!
In 1963, at the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa, Governor George Wallace blocked 2 African Americans from enrolling. The concerns about Nate traveling to football games in the South were well-founded. In a sense, Nate Northington began his journey of glory and heartbreak here in Frankfort, the capital of Kentucky. The last time he came to this place, he was a 17-year-old high school kid known as Nat Northington, heavily recruited to play football for Purdue in the Big Ten, one of the leading conferences in the country, and it was already integrated. But Nate and his family had been invited to Sunday dinner by the governor of Kentucky.
It was on a Sunday, December the 19th, 1965. The governor, your dad, had invited us down to the mansion, governor's mansion, right here, to have dinner. He invited my entire family to come down at the church. So we were very, very excited about coming to the governor's mansion.
And my father can persuade very well and put on the charm. And
oh, yes, absolutely. Yes,
he had a goal in mind, didn't he?
He did.
Well, Nate, on that Sunday in December that you remember well, I was 12 years old, and I don't remember it.
The mansion was beautiful, of course.
It was decorated for Christmas.
Yes, yes. It was a great meal, you know, had a wonderful time. After dinner was over, the governor invited me to his office, me and my high school coach. The factors that he presented to me were so convincing, and they just kind of resonated with me, you know, the fact that that would make a tremendous difference. You know, the last vestiges of segregation in the South will be broken. And he told me that he felt that I had the temperament, the athletic abilities, the character, and the
Oh, so you
scholastic.
remember
I
those
do.
specific
Oh, yes.
talking points
Yes.
that he...
Yes, I do. And definitely...
To Nate, the intense interest of Kentucky's governor must have come out of left field.
As I said earlier,
But in fact, it was the natural culmination of a series of remarkable events. UK had been integrated in 1946, but black enrollment had grown slowly. By the early 1960s, there were no more than 100 African Americans on campus, but race consciousness was growing. A group of black students formed a club to express themselves and seek political change. They called it Orjana, a Negro spelled backwards. And some white students, such as the editors of the school newspaper, began to give more serious thought to the inferior status of those black students.
I wonder why we don't have any African Americans on any of our sports teams. So, of course, in exploring that, we discovered there wasn't anybody in the South, any of the SEC schools. Some of the discussions at the university was, well, you know, we could do that here, but what happens when we take a young man or young woman and we go into the Deep South? If we go to Oxford, you see what's happened to James Meredith, and what about Tuscaloosa? And our conclusion was, I understand, but that doesn't give the University of Kentucky an excuse. Here's the editorial from the March 22nd, 1963 Kentucky Journal. If the university is to live up to its moral obligations, it must divorce itself from the segregation policy which dominates the Southeastern Conference.
The editorial elicits a wave of approval and invective. But even those eager to integrate UK sports acknowledge a problem. To even be a member of the Southeastern Conference, a school has to schedule at least 6 games in the conference. If UK integrates, they won't find 6 SEC schools to play them. Mississippi, for example, wouldn't play an integrated Kentucky team because, as Governor Barnett explained, after the game, there would be a social event. What would the Negroes do? They would attend. Would they dance with white girls? Not in Mississippi. May of 1963. The issue comes to a head in Ocala, Florida, at the yearly meeting of SEC athletic directors. To shut down Kentucky's plans to integrate, one of the Deep South directors calls for a show of hands. Who would agree to play an integrated UK team? He knows that Tennessee, bordering Kentucky, will agree to play them. But he's confident that only 1 or 2 more will agree. But shockingly, 5 more hands go up. Vanderbilt, Tulane, Florida, and even Georgia and Georgia Tech. That makes exactly 6 schools, the minimum required, willing to play UK's integrated teams. The Deep South schools, under the threat of losing competition and money, have no choice but to go along. A few days later, back at Kentucky, the athletics board votes to integrate Wildcat teams immediately. 48 hours later, the UK Board of Trustees appoints a new president for the university, John W. Oswald, from the University of California at Berkeley. A lot of people consider him to be an outsider, but suddenly, Kentucky has a progressive leader with a commitment to the new policy of integration. The day he was installed as the president of UK, Oswald marched alongside the man who would become his greatest ally in achieving that goal, Linda Breathitt's father, Ned Breathitt.
Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around.
In 1964, the new governor supported a massive march on Frankfort that would pressure the state legislature to pass a civil rights bill in Kentucky.
I think there's a famous photograph taken in the governor's office after the march. Martin Luther King was with Jackie Robinson.
Wow.
The year of the Frankfort March, President Lyndon Johnson pushed through a national civil rights bill, and Ned Breathitt was the only Southern governor who supported it.
And that's when he served with many of the great civil rights leaders, Ralph Abernathy, I believe, Vernon Jordan, Martin Luther King. My father wrote about what an incredible experience that was, to be sitting at the table with these giants.
Yes, you know, your father was ahead of his time.
He was.
Pressing for civil rights during that time, especially in the South.
He was an only
Breathitt
child.
and Oswald pressed UK's powerful basketball coach Adolph Rupp to recruit black players, such as in-state all-star center Wes Unseld, who was a friend and neighbor of Nate Northington's. But the stuck-in-his-ways coach was reluctant to promise Unseld's parents that their son would be safe traveling to games in the Deep South. So instead of basketball, Oswald and Breathitt turned their attention to recruiting black football players.
After we talked and discussed things, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a scholarship.
Yeah.
And asked me if I would accept a scholarship to the University of Kentucky to represent my home state of Kentucky. So I agreed that I would accept the scholarship. And
Were your parents in the room?
They were not in the room
They
at the
were
time.
not.
Nate's parents initially co-signed the agreement, but over the next few days, Mrs. Northington and a close friend of hers mailed a series of letters to Governor Breathitt expressing her concerns about Nate. To be perfectly blunt, will he be safe when he plays in such states as Mississippi?
No, it wasn't easy, but one of the things your dad told me that made a difference was that I wouldn't be alone. He had said that we would have another young man who was prepared to
Yes.
come to the University of Kentucky as well. That made a big difference to me.
No one, let me come in. Doors are fastened and the windows pinned. Keep your head on the plow and hold on. Noah said you done lost your track. Can't plow straight and keep looking back. Keep your hand on the plow and hold on.
Now, Lord have mercy. There's Dana's house. Here's our house. Boy, I hadn't seen this place in a while.
Greg Page was a middle child. Birchie was the oldest, and Robert Melvin the youngest. Their father, Robert, worked in the coal mines and in a tannery. Their mother, Wilma, was the only black registered nurse in Middlesboro. Although the Pages were not wealthy, Wilma Page was widely respected in the black community of Middlesboro and a member of the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights. In the early 1960s, many things in Middlesboro, including the school and church that the Pages attended, were segregated. But there was one thing in the little town that was not.
On the side over here is the Little League baseball field. And the good thing about that was a sport that the black kids and the white kids could play together.
The Middlesboro Little League was started in 1953 by a man named Harry Hogg. Young, idealistic, and just back from World War II, Hogg was determined to follow the National Little League rulebook to the letter.
All nationalities, no difference, the white, the black, coloreds, whatever you want to call. If you were a boy 12 and under and lived within the city limits of Middlesboro, you were eligible to come out and play. And there was some hesitancy on both sides in the beginning. I won't tell you there wasn't, but 90% of them were so excited to get to play baseball and get a uniform and a glove and a ball and a team. And I wrote to Williamsport, Pennsylvania, are we the only integrated Little League team around here? They wrote back and said, Mr. Hull, you're the only integrated team anywhere south of the Mason-Dixon line. When the whites and the colored play together, they win the state championship, which we did in '54. The very next year, we won the state championship.
And so, Greg Page and his black and white friends grew up playing sports together. But when they started high school, the kids who had become teammates and friends were separated. Greg's white friends played for Middlesboro High, but the all-black Lincoln School couldn't afford a football team. Greg was so frustrated he couldn't play football with his friends at the high school that he left Middlesboro, moved in with an aunt and uncle, and played football his freshman year in Lutzen, Minnesota. But 1 year later, Greg and his family got some good news. The Middlesboro schools had been integrated, and Greg quickly became a star for the Middlesboro High School Yellow Jackets.
You can tell this jersey has had a lot of wear on it. A lot of hard hits. And he was proud to wear this Middlesboro Yellow Jacket jersey, man.
When Greg was still a junior and not yet recruited by any other colleges, he caught the attention of an assistant football coach from Kentucky, almost by accident.
In 1964, My wife at that time, her home was in Middlesboro, and her father became ill. His nurse is Wilma Jean Page, Greg Page's mother, and she finds out that I'm a UK football coach.
Mrs. Page invited Coach Rice to come and watch Greg play.
And when I saw him, I said, wow, this guy can play, and had a spirit about him that was catching. You could see the other players gravitate toward him, and unbelievable. I thought of Jackie Robinson. I said, this might be the one.
In 1946, Homer Rice had tried out as a baseball player with the Brooklyn Dodgers at spring training, seen in this old film footage. Rice became friends with another young guy trying out that year, who shows his hitting ability here in a practice game. Homer's friend was Jackie Robinson, the athlete destined to break the color line in Major League Baseball. 18 years later, in 1964, Homer met Greg Page.
So I talked to him about coming to the UK as a junior in high school, and he was very excited about it. And I explained my situation with Jackie Robinson. I said, if you come to Kentucky, you'll be the Jackie Robinson of the Southeastern Conference.
In September of 1965, Greg signed a letter of intent to play for Kentucky and a scholarship offer in April of 1966.
Kentucky, the nation's #1 ranked ball club.
Ironically, that same spring of 1966, an all-white Kentucky basketball team lost in the NCAA Finals to Texas Western. The first time an all-black starting five won the championship.
National Collegiate Basketball Champion.
When Greg arrived with his parents to begin his career at Kentucky, he filled out an athlete information form. His goal? To play football for UK and to help open the way for more Negro athletes to play ball here. Greg Page and Nate Northington, who had separately made their decisions to break the color line, now came together as teammates and friends.
Freshman players could not play varsity. We had our own freshman team. Of course, the varsity team was the Wildcats, and so they referred to the freshman team as the Kittens. The freshman dorm for football players was called Kitten Lodge. Me, Greg Page, Phil Thompson, and Marty New from Ohio were roommates. Phil and Marty both were pretty comical, and Greg fit right in with them. You know, he had the same kind of personality. They were jokesters. I was the guy on the outside, I guess, with sort of a straight personality and not quite as much as a character as they were. So it was tough the first year dealing with those guys.
Nate was pretty quiet, stayed to the back, kept to himself.
Greg, on the other hand, make jokes, crack up. You know, he fit right in with everybody. Everybody loved him.
Greg would smile and laugh you off the chart, and Nate was, as he is today, one of the most humble people. He makes you want to be more like him. I mean, they were a perfect fit. It's almost like they knew what they were doing when they were recruiting these two guys, but I'm sure they didn't. They were just looking to get great athletes, and they both were great athletes.
Greg's about 6'2" and probably 220 pounds.
Like the modern-day weak side linebacker that runs everything down from behind. Probably one of the fastest players on the team.
Yeah, we had a really good freshman team. So Virginia Tech game, we weren't really moving the ball that well. And the coach told me to say, get in there, get in there, get in there. And sure enough, he pitched to me, and I headed towards the sidelines, of course, around the end. I mean, things just opened up. I guess it was just like a highway. I guess I kicked it in high gear and went about 40-something yards, 49 yards, I think, for a touchdown. First time I touched the ball, I was coming back to the sidelines, and I think he met me about halfway, and he was jumping up and down and hollering, "That's the way to do it, that's the way to do it."
The 1966 Kittens represented an outstanding recruiting class. Now with Nate starting at running back and Greg leading the team in tackles for a loss, they won their remaining games to finish 3-1 for the season. The only sour note was that in their final game, Nate injured his shoulder. For the next year, 1967, 3 more African Americans would be joining the team. There was a walk-on offensive lineman who was with the team just 1 year, Albert Johnson, and 2 scholarship athletes. Running back Houston Hogg was a laconic country kid who had grown up in the mountains near Hazard, Kentucky. Linebacker Wilbur Hackett was a cocky 5'9" dynamo from Louisville.
I believe in destiny. I was born in Winchester, Kentucky, and back then, Kentucky had a heck of a football team. Burr Bryant was a coach, actually, won the national championship, split it in 1950. And my dad worked at this company called Pound Tire Company. During the football season, the men who worked at Pound Tire Company would, on Saturdays, go to watch UK play. And of course, blacks didn't go to watch UK back then. And one day my daddy told me this story. I told those men, and well, who are white, he said, one of these days, I'm gonna be going to these games. Now I'm gonna fast forward to being recruited in 1966, when it came down to the decision time. We sat down, my dad, my father, and my mother, and it's almost like he just kind of laid the law down. Now I'm not saying he made me go to UK, but he strongly influenced me. I didn't tell Dad I was going to UK. He told me I was going to UK.
For his senior year of high school, Houston Hogg moved with his family from Hazard to attend Davis County High School near Owensboro. He was recruited by several traditionally black colleges, in addition to Western Kentucky University and UK.
When I was recruited to UK, we had a place here called the Gage Tower. Took me upstairs where the recruiting coach was. They pulled out the letter of intent and everything. One of the guys pulled out a $10 bill and he said, "This is what you get if you go to Western." Then he pulled out a $100 bill and he said, "This is what you get if you go to Kentucky." So I'm thinking, oh, he's gonna give me $100 to sign with Kentucky, you know. Me being naive, young kid, you know, not knowing what's going on. I didn't know what was going on. So I signed the letter of intent. This guy picked up his 10 and his 20, put it back in his pocket. Said, "Let's go." I remember that. And I walked out there. I didn't know. Head was spinning. I said, what's going on? What did I just do? Now, when I went to UK, I didn't know that they didn't have blacks there. I didn't know that.
I know we're talking about the integration of the SEC and going to a school that's dominantly that's white. I mean, in the conference.
I didn't know that no blacks had played in the SEC. I didn't know that.
I never thought about integrating. I just thought about I wanted to play football somewhere, and I was fortunate enough to go to a school on a football scholarship.
It's like, did you go up there to make history? No. I went up there to play football.
The racial situation was not the only thing that Houston didn't know about. He also didn't know that head coach Charlie Bradshaw was known for his brutal practices.
Let's meet the man who has taken over direction of Kentucky football.
Hi, Claude. Hi, fans. Well, actually, I'm a little knotty-headed country boy from Alabama.
In 1962, his first year as head coach, Bradshaw had started with 88 players and ended the season with 28, the group that came to be known as the Thin 30.
So many of these youngsters that we inherited were so devoid of ambition. And the biggest thing was that our young people today are not disciplined.
Bradshaw thought if he put you through some horrendous exercise, it's going to make you a better football player. He didn't know he was killing us.
He was a good man, a good, strong Christian man. But on the football field, he was a monster. I mean, he was almost like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
I truly believe that Charlie was probably a multiple personality.
And I can remember Coach Bradshaw turning his hat around backwards and trying to show us drills and headbutting with players, and his forehead would be bleeding.
That was something he wanted everybody to see. you know, you all need to know how bad I am. And we believed him. He was an ex-Marine.
There was a big tower on a practice field, and Coach Bradshaw would be up there.
And we'd have scrimmages, and he'd be up there watching the scrimmage. You know, it's kind of intimidating. You know, you walk out on that practice field, and there's 3 or 4 stories of tower.
But when we came down our tower, it's almost like, oh,
somebody's going to get their butt kicked.
We had a scrimmage, and this particular day, coaches were really upset. They ran them and ran them. Oh, it must have been 40 or 50 sprints. And I remember Mike Cassidy, who was an offensive guard from Xenia, Ohio. He came up, and he came from back here, and he led into Bradshaw and caught him right here and leveled him and knocked him colder than a cucumber. Well, all hell broke loose after that. But 2 weeks later, he's the starting offensive guard. I like this kid's attitude.
Even though I didn't agree with a lot of things that he did, he made you tough.
He was the most intense coach I probably ever had, and I don't think he did anything mean or overly disciplining us. I think his heart was in the game, and I have a lot of respect for him.
A lot of respect, a lot of love for him.
I didn't know what it was like to work that hard.
It allowed me to do a lot of things I never thought I could do.
Give 120% instead of 100%.
He taught me a mental toughness.
It was a great experience for me, and I think it helped me in life later on.
You have to overcome, and you have to forget, and you got to move on. It's the next play. It's not that play.
I'm a big Coach Bradshaw supporter, you can tell.
Tuesday, August 22nd. The sun comes up over the Cooper Drive practice field. It's a typical warm summer day in the bluegrass. And a typical grueling Charlie Bradshaw practice begins. But this one will be different.
Typical day, as far as I was concerned, we were practicing with the defensive backs. I was. And because Greg was practicing at another part of the field.
Because Greg was the defensive end, so it was Van Note and Greg and me and the other defensive ends there at the time.
We was in light togs, we call it, you know, helmet, shoulder pads, shorts.
Shorts and shoulder pads. And we were doing this, what we call a pursuit drill.
It was a pursuit drill, as I recall, where somebody runs and everybody converges on that player.
And we had to go in and hit with our nose first and Buddy right in the numbers.
Greg was, the play came to his side. He was a defensive end.
If I'm the defensive tackle and the defensive end's first and I'm second, there's 7 guys and everybody's frantically trying to get there.
Of course, he got there first to the ball.
Everybody can't hit him.
Everybody else had to come and break down.
You're hitting each other.
And somehow, someone hit Greg.
He kind of lunged.
In his spine, in the back.
So I don't know if anybody hit his legs.
And I think Greg just got his head and his neck in the wrong spot and got popped and literally fell on the field.
When I looked down, I mean, I thought he was dead right there.
Then all of a sudden, they were carrying him out on a stretcher.
And then we came over and had everybody get on one knee, you know, and that's when they told us that Greg, that he had been injured. Had to be taken to the hospital, and that they didn't know the extent, you know, the injury. So we were just really, you know, just didn't know what to think.
I think it was sort of a routine thing as somebody fell and he tripped, and it was very strange.
It was a, what do they call it, surreal? It was like something that wasn't really happening.
The incident is so vivid in my mind because from the moment Greg got hurt, we never saw him again.
Greg Page now lies in a hospital room, his body in traction, breathing with the help of a respirator. The only regular visitors are Charlie Bradshaw, Greg's parents, Robert and Wilma Page, and a handful of Greg's cousins.
Mary your hand on the plow. Hold on. Hold that chain and never tire. Every round goes higher and higher. Keep your hand on that plow. Hold on.
I remember my Aunt Wilma calling my mother, telling her that they were gonna have to go to Lexington. And they went, and they called back, and they told us that he was paralyzed from his neck down.
You know, I was there to help them out. They had fixed up this, it was like a thing for him to read, and he had this pointer in his mouth that he would turn the pages with. But he was in good spirits. Yeah. Because
I spoke with him on the telephone, you know, a couple of times because of Rochelle.
Yeah.
She would call and she had told him a story that the Huff boy, you know, I dated, and he'd asked me to the movies.
Oh, I couldn't remember
he
what
said, do you want to go Dutch? So Greg told me to tell him, no, we're gonna go Post. I don't know what that meant.
We got to laughing about that, and he said to me, Rochelle, don't make me laugh, because when I laugh, my chest hurts.
And we talked to him, and we laughed, you know, for a while. Then they got off, you know, we hung up and stuff, you know. So that's why I always thought that everything was going to be all right by the way his, you know, his demeanor was, you know. So.
And when I walked in that place and saw him just stretched out there on that, and I started to cry, and he said, what are you crying for? I said, don't cry. Come and give me a kiss.
I never thought that he would not
that he
get
was
better.
Gonna die. I didn't either.
I never would have thought that he was not going to get better.
Greg may have thought that too, because Greg was talking about, I'm going to be out of here by the time they played that first ball game.
That's what he would say.
The first ball game is at Indiana, but Greg is still in the hospital. He listens on the radio as Kentucky loses 12-10. Greg tells his parents he would like to have a visitor.
I mean, it's something I never will forget, obviously. You know, see him just laying there and unable to move, in traction, on respirator and all of that. So I guess I've often thought about why he wanted me to come. Obviously, we were close. And, you know, I think that he, you know, I'm sure he wanted to see how I was, you know, more than me seeing how he was. He wanted, you know, I just feel like he wanted to make sure that I was okay, you know.
Saturday, September 30th, 1967. Today, Kentucky will face Ole Miss at Stoll Field, the historic game in which Greg and Nate are to break the color line in the Southeastern Conference.
I guess the morning before the game was going to take place, Coach Bradshaw, they contacted us, all the players, you know, I guess we met. And he let us, he at that time, he let us know that Greg had passed, you know, away.
It had been 38 days since the pursuit drill injury. The official cause of death was cardiac arrest. 35,000 fans now converge on Stoll Field for the Ole Miss game, but university officials are not even sure the game should be played.
I guess really couldn't imagine why we were even playing the game. You know, at that point, none of us was in a position, I don't think, to go out there and play, you know, a football game. But parents, wanted to go on with the game. They wanted to go ahead and play it, and they feel like Greg would have wanted the same thing. For us to go out there and play.
Hello, sport fans. Stan Torgerson speaking and bringing you another program of Ole Miss football highlights. The Ole Miss Rebels travel to Stowe Field in Lexington, Kentucky. Ole Miss will be wearing white with Kentucky in the dark uniform.
A few hours after learning of Greg's death, Nate started on defense against Ole Miss. But on the 5th play, he dove hard at a ball carrier. The left shoulder that he had separated in his freshman year was badly re-injured, and Nate left the game. It was an abrupt end to a strange day. A day that marked a milestone in the history of sports and civil rights in the South. But for Nate, at that moment, it meant nothing. Kentucky lost 26-13. The day after the Ole Miss game, there was a memorial service for Greg in the end zone of Stowe Field, and 2 days later, the team traveled 3 hours in buses to Middlesboro for his funeral.
I was a pallbearer in the funeral, and I remember I could not believe that Greg was in that casket. And of course, I broke down at that, and things like that will always be with you.
Following the funeral, Nate, Wilbur, Houston, and the white players returned to the university. And that same night, the coaches put them through a grueling 3-hour practice.
When we got back and they told us to get dressed for the practice, we were stunned. It was like, and Coach Bradshaw was hoping it would be something to put it past us. And in his later days, he said it was just a huge mistake.
As sophomores, Nate and Greg were assigned to be roommates in one of the new dormitories at UK. But since the pursuit drill injury in August, Nate has been living alone.
For me, it was going to practice, going back to the dorm, being alone. So just that whole time period was depressing. And being injured myself and not being able to perform, so all of it was not a very good time, for me at all.
We weren't being selfish, but because we didn't know enough about the circumstance, I don't think we were there enough to support Nate like he needed.
And I guess I was the kind of person that didn't really talk a lot, so I guess I kind of internalized a lot of it.
Now, as I look at the magnitude of it, he was on an island.
Unlike today, where you might have counseling or grief counseling for the team, I don't remember any of that taking place. I don't think that was not something that was done.
In the next game at Auburn, Nate dislocated his shoulder yet again, which caused him to play hardly at all in the 4th game against Virginia Tech. 2 days after that game, Nate was told to report to the coach's office in Memorial Coliseum. He had failing grades in some of his classes.
They called me over to assistant coach who was over academics, I guess, at that time, and told me that he found out that I had missed some classes, because of that they were going to take away my meal ticket. So that didn't really strike me the right way. With everything else that was going on and what had happened and everything that was transpiring, then that was really I feel like that was the last straw.
It was always put in there that he quit. And I tell you, that is so far from the truth.
So I went to talk to Houston and Wilbur. I couldn't see that things were going to improve, at all for me. But I did feel like that they were, could support each other and they could make it, So, so I was pretty adamant about them not leaving. And so I went and got my things together, to go home.
I always used to say UK football had a dark cloud over it. It's almost like we never recovered from Greg's death. We had these athletes, we had this team, but we had tragedy. It's almost like you're looking over your shoulder because you know an accident is coming. We had another player the same year, Cecil New, broke his neck. I watched the play. The only difference is he didn't die from that accident, but he was paralyzed for the rest of his life until he died. Stan Forston was an outstanding quarterback, suffered a concussion. It ended his career the same year.
Looking back today at the injuries to black and white players, you might say the cause was bad luck or brutal practices. But at the time, looking only at Greg's death, it was hard to avoid a more sinister explanation.
You look at football, it's a violent game. I don't see Greg's death as being done purposely. It was just a freak accident. But most of my friends never understood. It was like, how can you stay up there when they kill? Are you gonna stay there? Are you gonna, you could be next. I mean, I heard it all.
But Greg was a special kind of guy, and it hurt me so bad when he died. And it hurt me to find out that Greg was doing a pursuit drill, and all of a sudden he had injured his neck. I could not figure that out. There was a lot of suspicion, you know what I'm saying? But people kind of kept it to themselves, but it was a lot of suspicion.
It was just tragic, and no one knew what to think. They didn't know whether it was an accident, intentional. But our aunt, his mother, was a calming force.
Yeah. Yeah, she was.
And because of her attitude and Uncle Robert's attitude, everyone else just fell in line.
A lot of people believe that there was foul play involved. Personally, me or my family never felt that way. Greg liked those players.
This photo of Wilma Page was taken in late October of 1967, just a couple of weeks after Greg's death. At the very moment the photo was taken, Mrs. Page was writing this letter.
Dear Coach Bradshaw and Mrs. Bradshaw, we are getting along fairly well, some days good, some days bad. The last major article in our local newspaper had this heading: he must have been a wonderful guy. All of Greg's fans across the country could say the same thing about you. The entire letter is taking away the hurt and feelings that her and my father have and trying to console Coach Bradshaw. We as well cannot begin to know the hardships you encountered to make this possible, but all of this was leading up to bigger and better moments for many people, as well as a future for Greg and Nate.
Barely halfway through their first varsity season, the fleet runner handpicked by the governor and the chiseled defensive end, who was to be the next Jackie Robinson, were both gone. Left standing in their shoes were the two freshmen, Wilbur and Houston.
When I went to University of Kentucky, I didn't think about integrating anything. There were some players on our team from Alabama, Arkansas. One guy had his big rebel flag in his room. He left his room one night, and when he came back, the rebel flag was gone because we burned it. Some of the guys would mention about being black, and I'd have to kind of give them a little history lesson and then kind of let them know how I felt. Our coaches tried to bring us together. I remember one time we got a jukebox, but the problem with the jukebox was we fought over what music we were going to listen to. So they had to get rid of it because the black players didn't like the music that the white players did. So anyway, they had to get rid of that juke. That didn't work.
I didn't think nothing of it. The racial aspect, it kind of hit me when they had a speaker, and the speaker was George Wallace.
Segregation tomorrow and segregation forever.
After it was over, 3 white boys came up to me. I was walking across the campus, and they said, George Wallace is going to help you, boy. I said, what? I said, how's George Wallace going to help me? And it made them mad. And the next thing you know, we was fighting.
Houston would give you the shirt off his back. And that's the kind of guy he was. But you didn't want to cross him. So
this one kid, he ran in the dorm. When I opened the door, he swung at me. And when he swung, I shut the door. And his fist hit that door and broke the bones up his arm, you know.
Houston had that old, dry, kind of country boy wisdom.
I remember the dean told me, he said, I know you're going to have trouble. He said, just don't beat up these kids so bad.
We were brothers, and we had to be because we understood what we were dealing with.
The racism they dealt with on UK's campus was nothing compared to what they would face traveling to games in the Deep South. The first was in 1968 to play Ole Miss in Jackson, Mississippi.
The athletic department had letters and there were death threats, and I'm not going to say that we were afraid, but we didn't want to really go. And we actually, the bus that took us to the airport, Houston and I missed the bus because we had talked about it, and we said we weren't going. And then they sent the trainer to come back when they realized we weren't there. They sent the trainer back to get us, and we went on to Mississippi. The state troopers were there to protect us, were jeering and calling us Leroy.
Hey, Leroy, where's your mama and all this kind of stuff.
When we look back at the crowd, you could just see the hatred.
You hear the fans hollering, kill that end, kill that end. And you try to disregard what they're saying and play ball, but you can't do it.
It's legal to play football in Jackson, Mississippi, but we don't like it.
I had read the paper one morning, and the headlines, I'll never forget it, had a big write-up. And she said, oh, Wilbur, look. She said, our son is there. I said, Ollie, if you look in the living room by the door, my bag is already packed to go, and as soon as I get up, I'll be in Mississippi.
Ole Miss and Kentucky clash in Jackson, Mississippi, and over 30,000 of the faithful sit in to watch what is expected to be a real knocking football game. They're not disappointed.
Every time he left to go south, I would just pray, 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 because I knew the conditions in the South at that time. And I thought maybe somebody would try to hurt Wilbur. And I just knew that something could happen to him. Even when Wilbur would go with him, I would worry about him, right. You know, because I know he likes to run his mouth quite a bit, so.
I didn't want to go in the stands. I wanted to be on the side where Kentucky's ball team was. And that's where I stood, on the sideline. I just wanted to be close to my son in the event that something should happen. I would be there and wouldn't have to worry about getting there.
That's Manning talking with Coach Vaught.
Boy, I'll never forget that night.
Manning tries to eat up yardage in bigger bites.
Wilbur broke through the line and hit Manning, and he didn't get up. And I said, oh, Lord. But he got up, and the next thing I know, they came over and shook his hand. And I said, thank you, Jesus.
Just like Kerry said, I think it was Kerry Shehead, and I was calling the defense. When I was calling, saying, Kerry told me, he said, Wilbur, can you stand back from the huddle a little bit in case they miss? Back then, it was their birthright to be a football player in the South. So they didn't want black folks to invade the little world. They didn't want us to be a part of this thing that they love so much in the South. It was their religion, and they didn't want us to come into their neighborhood. They didn't want us to come into their house and sit on their couch, because black folks didn't do that. So here we come, and you think they want us? When I looked up at that crowd, I saw a lynch mob, and if they could have got hold to me or Houston, I guarantee you we wouldn't have come back.
They didn't want to be a part of a change, but the change came.
Sometimes I feel discouraged and think my work's in vain. But then the Holy Spirit revives my soul again.
Yeah, I'm proud that we did what we did, but I think it was all done for a purpose. You know, sometimes God uses you for a purpose. Hey, girl.
Hey.
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing good. Good to see you.
You too.
I just told you probably give me a ticket one day for speeding.
No, I wouldn't do that.
Hannah Douglas is a rookie police officer with the city of Owensboro, Kentucky. But 12 years ago, she was a struggling 15-year-old with a 3-month-old daughter. Houston and his wife Deborah, as foster parents, brought Hannah and her baby into their home.
When we got to their house, they welcomed us, they treated us like family, and it was just good for me to see at that age and what I was going through that they were so accepting.
Hannah was an exceptional girl when she came to our house, and no problem at all. Hannah took on her responsibilities, raised her little girl, and got everything straightened out, and you can see the results of it right now. She's a beautiful, beautiful girl.
Over their lifetime, the Hoggs have taken into their home over 200 foster children. They also raised 5 children of their own.
To me, a hero makes you want to be better. And there's a man alive that can make me want to be better than my dad. A hero changes the world, and not for himself. And that's why I say he's my hero. It wasn't because of his athletic ability. I know him as a man that treated people with respect and looked after others, always helping someone. That's what a hero is. Nothing about his holding a pigskin, none of that was why he was a hero to me.
You take Houston Hogg, you take Wilbur, you take Greg, you take Nate. My goodness, you couldn't ask for better teammates.
Like Jeff Van Noda and Dick Palmer and Kerry Sheahead, who was my roommate from Florida. Our teammates were very good about accepting us and making us at ease and comfortable.
I think the photo speaks for itself. Greg Page, myself, and Dick Palmer. Just look at the photo. It was just that closeness we had with each other. I mean, that's a true, authentic smile by everyone there.
As a matter of fact, in my junior year, they voted me captain. I was the first African-American captain in the SEC. So, it was football. We came there to play football, and that's what we did.
Who are those children all dressed in blue? Wade in the water. It must be the ones that made it through. God's gonna trouble the water.
Perhaps this is the great achievement of these men, to forge bonds of loyalty between black and white teammates, and judge each other not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, and their ability to run, block, and tackle. In 2012, the men who had played football under Charlie Bradshaw started having annual reunions to renew their bond as teammates. They called themselves the Bradshaw Boys.
It was a freakish injury. We were just doing a pursuit drill and someone rolled up on
You know, Charlie, and I blamed him for that incident because you don't go full speed in shorts and
When I
shorts.
was called to do this, I says, I've tried to put this out of my mind. I says, I went through this.
Married here, I got my degree, and I learned my craft. Then at the Two Keys, because they had all the beer you could drink between 3 and 6. We
I'll
cleaned
tell you
them
guys
out.
the truth, man. When the white guys went by those dogs, they just sat there and wagged their tail. When they saw me in Hackett, they went crazy. Them dogs went off, man. I mean, them guys was holding them like this.
Integration in the South. Football did it as much as anything because of the place that football takes up in the South. I think what you did and all the pain that was endured, the accomplishment is remarkable.
You know, I think things are destined to happen, and you know we can't change the course of history.
In the years after Nate Northington left UK, he enrolled at Western Kentucky University and became an outstanding running back for the Hilltoppers. As an adult, he moved back to Louisville, became active in his church, raised a family, and built a successful career with the City Housing Authority. But over the years, as the media covered the anniversaries of his integration of the SEC, Nate would sometimes decline to be interviewed.
I don't think any living human could have stayed the course that he was on. And they did not treat him right. He did not quit. I have just this feeling that bothers him. And I want him to get that out of his craw because he did not quit.
Paul Karam, a quarterback from Louisville, arrived at UK the year after Greg died and Nate left the team. But he was a teammate and friend of Wilbur and Houston's. Over the last few years, Paul has also reached out to Nate.
No resentment, no anger, no frustration, proud to wear the uniform. First time I went down and talked to Nate about all this, he's in his office downtown at the Housing Authority, and there's 3 pictures on the wall. One of them, he's signing his letter of intent with Coach Bradshaw on this shoulder and Ned Breathen on this shoulder. Picture next to it is a headshot in his jersey, number 23, University of Kentucky football player. And the picture over here is a pose with a ball in his hand like a running back. So that tells you what the man has in his heart. So I want Nate Northington's heart healed.
When Nate Northington came to this Bradshaw Boys reunion, it was the first time he had seen the other players since he left the team in 1967. In 2012, frustrated by the lack of public awareness of his teammates' historic role in the integration of the SEC, Paul Karam started a petition signed by the Bradshaw Boys and presented to the UK athletics program, urging them to recognize the achievements of Greg, Nate, Wilbur, and Houston, perhaps with a statue.
You get to sit down with Paul Karam. He was just a guy that was such a great proponent of honoring these guys. And frankly, I think everyone's trying to figure out the right thing to do. And how do you do that?
You also be very, very proud of the fact that Kentucky was the first school in the SEC to integrate.
You know, I look at our team now in football, I look at our basketball team, we have a lot of African Americans participating, and without those 4 guys, I'm not sure that the opportunity exists for them to play the game that they love. So we can't get those guys in front of our team enough.
In the fall of 2015, the university honored the 3 living heroes, Nate, Wilbur, and Houston, and the fallen hero, Greg, by inviting his brother, Mel Page, to represent him.
On the field with us, representing the late Greg Page, his brother Mel.
The university proudly recognized its groundbreaking role in the integration of the SEC. Not only were there the 4 football players, 5 counting Albert Johnson. In the same class as Wilbur and Houston, UK also recruited outstanding black track stars, including Jim Green from Eminence, Kentucky, then recognized as one of the fastest men in the world. In the immediate wake of these Wildcats came many courageous black athletes at other SEC schools, like Perry Wallace of Vanderbilt, the first black varsity basketball player in the conference. Now, finally, Nate Northington is telling his story and has even written a book. He's been widely celebrated as a civil rights pioneer in the historic game of 1967, even by his opponent in that game, the University of Mississippi. But Nate is always clear about who deserves to be honored for those achievements.
You know, I just wish that people will appreciate not just what I did, but what Greg did, Greg Page, because he gave his life, you know, for something that he believed in.
With all the little black boys that have entered into the Southeastern Conference at all of these different universities, have these kids been told who made the sacrifice?
You know, and some of them may not even know Greg, but Greg opened that door for them.
Thank you, Greg, for making a path for these kids. Thank you, Miss Wilma and Mr. Robert, for humbly giving your child to them. And most of all, thank you, God, for the opportunity that you put a Greg Page in our place at that time to do what he had to do.
"50 years ago, hardly anyone knew or understood the significance of what transpired at the University of Kentucky in the fall of 1967. Greg's death and Nate's integration of SEC football warranted only a passing mention in the story about UK's loss to Ole Miss.
Makes me feel almost stupid and embarrassed that those of us who are in the media didn't do a far better job of reporting this. So I almost feel like we should apologize to those guys because, I mean, this was a big, big story.
Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this special event in UK athletics history.
You should never forget the contributions, the sacrifices, the courage it took to be the first.
What these 4 men did to transform our program, our school, and the Southeastern Conference. Guys, pull that covering.
The athlete, who is a hero of sport, is recognized immediately as they cross the goal line and the clock runs out. For other heroes, it may take 50 years. Of such men, we create statues that have the power to impress. Let us also hope that these 4 will inspire. For we are, all of us, called to be heroes, even if very few will ever earn that name.
There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sick soul. The sun shines bright on my old Kentucky home. It's summer, the people are gay. They are gay. Well, the corn tobs ripe and the meadows are in bloom, and the birds make music all day, and they sing. And they sing. The young folks roll on the little cabin floor. All merry, all happy and bright. They're so bright. Bright hard times come a knocking at my door. Oh, Kentucky home. We say goodnight. We say goodnight. Yeah. Weep no more, my lady. Oh, weep no more today. We will sing a song for my old Kentucky home. My old Kentucky